Have you ever been told by a medical professional something related to breastfeeding that you later found out was totally wrong? Today, my guest, Glenna James, shares her intimate stories of baby feeding and the struggles that she had with becoming a parent, dealing with postpartum mood disorders, needing help and support from her family, and also feeling resentful about that. And then how that impacted her ability to feed her babies human milk. I hope that this story touches you as much as it touched me. Enjoy. When I first returned to work, I had no idea how I was going to manage going to work, handling drop-offs and pickups, and doing all the other duties I needed to do, like get dinner on the table. If you are in this situation, I've got a solution for you. Go to feastandfettle.com, where you can select from a menu of delicious options and have home-cooked meals delivered right to your front door. Imagine taking meal planning off your plate, taking grocery shopping off your plate for those dinners, and knowing that all you have to do is pick up your baby, get home, and heat and serve meals that you have selected for your family. If you live in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and now Maine, go to feastandfettle.com and use my code MILK, M-I-L-K, to get $30 off your first order. You've got nothing to lose.
I am the practitioner behind the Holistic Glen by Glenna James. Nice play on the word for that. My husband chose that name. I'm a fertility and pregnancy coach as well as a holistic health practitioner. So I have many certifications. I am a certified herbalist. I've took many certifications and continuing education classes in women's health. And in December, I'll be lucky to start a childbirth education class. Even though I've already had kids and took classes, I want to keep growing and adding things.
Great.
And I'm a mom of two.
And a mom of two. Awesome. Okay. I can't wait to get into your stories, and then we'll hear a little bit more about the services you offer towards the end. So before you tell us about how baby feeding went for you, I'd love to take you back to your childhood and your upbringing and have you think about any babies that you encountered and whether or not you have any memories of breastfeeding.
Oh, yeah. I became an aunt at 5 or 6 because my sister had a kid very young. I don't think she breastfed my niece. I don't have any memory because I was so little at the time. She might have, but I know there was bottle feeding there because she was very young, so I know that was a thing. But I heard about breastfeeding because later on she had a baby when I was a teenager and she did breastfeed him. So I know
Okay.
that. And I know it was a thing my mom did with me because she's told me about it until I bit her. That's what she said, until you bit me.
I hear that a lot from people of the generation right before mine, that biting was definitely the time when it stopped. Okay. And so then as you think about any experiences you had with babies growing up, you have any other memories of seeing babies breastfeed, or do you have memories of seeing babies bottle feed? Any kids that you babysat, or cousins or family or friends of the family?
Yeah, there was a lot of people around my grandmother. So my cousin, when she had her baby as a young woman, she bottle fed. So I saw that. I don't know if she breastfed, but I know she bottle fed, and I saw that. And bottle feeding was a big thing, I think, in my family because a lot of women worked. But I knew about breastfeeding. I saw that in school. We learned about it in health class. So I
You
knew it was
did?
an option. Yes, I knew it
Oh,
was an
wow.
option.
Okay. How old were you when you learned about breastfeeding in health class?
Oh my God, I was 14, 15.
Okay. I don't hear that very commonly, so that's an exception to the rule. This is a question I ask all of my clients and all of my podcast guests, and I have not heard that before. So that's pretty interesting. Do you remember what was talked about when it came to breastfeeding in that class? I know it was a long time ago.
Yeah, because it was a health and biology class, they went through pregnancy a little bit and they went through the different feeding options because in the school we were at, there was a lot of teen pregnancies. One of the
Mhm.
ladies that was actually in my grade, in ninth grade, she got pregnant
Mhm.
and she came back, and that's what she did.
Oh, wow.
So I remember seeing that because of that statistic of having kids so young.
Okay. All right. Okay, so then fast forward and you're starting your own family. You can go ahead and dive into your baby feeding stories, and if I have any questions, I'll jump in.
Okay, my first daughter I had, and because my sister had her child at the same time, which was a little girl, she was in the breastfeeding. She was always into that, and she's like, "Glenna, you should do it since you don't have to work and all that." And I did. I went into the mindset of like, I'm gonna breastfeed Anastasia, and I'm gonna do it. And I remember a lactation consultant coming in and helping me because I was scared. I was scared. There was this like, I don't know what to do with this, and she helped. But I had a problem with pumping because they wanted to try to use the pump, and I just, even when my milk came in, I was not producing enough, and it. I remember it scaring me, and I was so happy my mom knew what to do. She knew what to do with that, so I remember being tired and waking up, and I think I breastfed her for 2 to 3 months,
Mhm.
and I loved the experience. Like it felt right. It felt comfortable to do that. And then also I didn't have to worry about the expense. That's another thing because it was right there. And because her birth was so traumatic, it helped heal that information. I don't like to say this, but I bonded with both my kids very differently because of
Mhm.
the different experience, and I'm not shy to say that. I love
Mhm.
both of them the same, but there's something mentally, especially when you have postpartum and baby blues, breastfeeding really helped. And when I had to stop because I got thrush, I wish I would have had a phone to call my sister because she knew what to do. She would have been able
Mm.
to tell me, looking back on it, just pump and just give Anastasia the bottle, and you can go back to breastfeeding later when you're healed up because she had it and I had it. But nothing was coming out when I was pumping, and it was so hard, it was so sore that my mom was like, "It's not worth it. Let's just bottle feed her and you just stop breastfeeding." And it was like, okay, I understand at 20 something years old, you take that advice, but the drying up of the milk, and she did it old school. She goes, "We're gonna bind you so that it makes it easier," and that hurt.
Mhm.
Taking a warm shower and it coming out, the milk coming out. I think that's a trauma for me because
Yeah.
it hurt, and then I still to this day have a issue of saying I failed because I started something and I failed, and that was
Mm.
very hard for me. But I'm happy I did because she has a perfect immune system, even
Mhm.
though she's had problems. And I love her to death, but because of that fear, I went into that with my son,
Mhm.
and I had an emergency C-section with him, and he's had so many problems, immune system problems, things that he's had, and I sit here and I look at the literature and wish I would have breastfed him. It might have not fully got rid of his problems, but it might have helped with a lot of those. Especially him being a baby that was sensitive and had to be on the sensitive formula. He had to be on Nutramigen. I was
Mhm.
happy my mom had my brother who had to be on the same stuff, so she
Mhm.
knew what to do. But he could have just been on breastfed, and that would have not been an issue. We wouldn't have had to go through all that. I was just
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah, so I wanna take you back to when your daughter got thrush. Tell me about how you found out that it was thrush that you were dealing with and the advice that your healthcare providers were giving you.
Okay, don't know if it was I don't think it was my OBGYN, but it was the pediatric doctor. I changed my pediatric doctor later on because of it. One of the reasons is because of this. He was like, "Yeah, I had it. She had it. It was white in her mouth. My mom, my sister, they all knew it was thrush. Like, you need to go to the doctor. You and the baby." So they told me I needed to take antibiotics because it was thrush, and they treated it. It was really red sore. I was cracking, bleeding on around the nipples, and they just told me, they're like, she can't breastfeed while you're on the antibiotics. You need to bottle. You need to bottle feed.
Mm.
So I remember my mom coming in with formula to bottle feed her, and they're like, that's what you do. When it goes away, you can start breastfeeding again. But I'm just like, what do I do in the meantime?
Yeah, and that's wrong information as well,
Oh,
and I
really?
think oh, yeah, and what happens is pediatricians and doctors, they actually don't receive breastfeeding education in med school. So I always tell people I like to work with their providers because their providers are there for them for the full 18 years of their baby's life. If they're seeing a pediatrician, if they're seeing a family doctor, it could be longer. And they have a wide breadth of knowledge where, as an IBCLC, our knowledge is very deep around this topic of human milk, feeding at the body, pumping, for it could be a few years depending on how long you feed your baby. So we have very deep knowledge in one area and they have a breadth of knowledge in many areas. But unfortunately, this is one of the things that we see. Dentists, anyone going in for a surgery, primary care providers will just automatically tell parents that they need to pump and dump or they need to not breastfeed for a certain duration when they are on medication. And this is absolutely not true. And there are lots of studies on all the medications that are possible to take, and they are able to determine how much of that medicine will get into the breast milk and determine the safety for the baby. And the vast majority of antibiotics are absolutely fine to take while breastfeeding.
See, I wish I'd known that, because it was a
Right,
big defeat. Because
right.
when going into it after having her, they were like, you, one of your nipples is inverted and you have problems. And
Mm,
I'm 35. I look at my body every day and I'm just like, no, I never did. So it's like, what are you talking about? I don't. So it's because she wasn't latching right, and it took the hospital to get a lactation consultant to come in and work with me. I just wish I would have known that service was provided after the hospital.
exactly. I know. I know. And I always like to reassure people that whatever happened, whatever twists and turns your baby feeding took, regardless of whether or not you met the goals that you set out in the beginning, if you needed to change the plan, it was not your fault. Most likely you were led astray or there was some systemic barrier that got in the way to getting the right support. And every person who is feeding a baby is just taking it moment by moment, day by day, and doing the best that they can in that moment. So, of course, you did the best you could. You were following a provider's advice.
Yeah, and I wish that I would have known insurance covers this.
Yeah,
Going back and looking, insurance covers that. Even my mother, we've had this conversation. She goes, that was provided in the hospital. Afterwards, it was known about and provided. It's at born in the 60s, had kids in the 70s and 80s. It was provided. She's after the 80s is when it became an issue, where
mm,
we didn't know this.
mm.
So it's, I don't have any problems with the bottle, but I do feel like we are reliant on it much.
Yeah, no one person can say what is good or bad for another
No,
family, and there are so many structural barriers to being able to feed bodies from babies from our bodies that I'm
yeah,
so glad that we have other tools because it's not fair to ask that of people and then not provide the right support.
yeah.
But I'm really sorry that you were given that advice. There's also some new information out in the last couple of years about thrush and that it is often way overdiagnosed. And for instance, you had the cracked nipples. Was it painful breastfeeding?
No, not until she got the white stuff and that started happening with my nipples and everything. Yeah.
Okay, because thrush looks very distinct when it's on a nipple. And often babies who have tongue ties, they actually have what we call milk tongue. It looks white on the back and it will damage people's nipples. Or there might be a bacterial infection going on in the breasts, but thrush is not as common as what we used to say it
Oh, wow.
was. Yeah. But we can't know. We can't know what
Yeah.
was going on with you that many years ago. You were trusting a provider led you astray. And then to have the situation of having to dry up your milk so quickly and binding your chest, which can lead to further infection if milk gets stuck there and it can't come out. So I'm glad that didn't happen to you. But how long were you binding?
My mom only it was recommended. My mom said it might be easier not to have that issue because I remember coming out of the shower and be like, "Mom is doing all this and I can't feed Anastasia," and because it was coming through my shirt and everything, she goes, "Just wrap it. It will help with that." That was only for a day or so,
Mhm.
and it was painful because not breastfeeding, I got engorged. I remember
Yeah.
that, and that was painful. And I just remember getting in the shower crying, and it just that's the way I helped relieve a lot of that was through taking a warm shower, and it really was an issue.
I'm so sorry. That sounds incredibly difficult. And were you mourning the loss of your milk at that time? Did it feel like
And I think that's, I didn't have, and it's weird, I didn't have postpartum. I had baby blues, but I didn't have really set in postpartum till then. And
mhm.
my OBGYN, when I went back for my 6-month checkup and everything, he's like, "You have postpartum depression." I'm like, "Yeah." And here's the reason why. I know why. It's because of that. I looked at the bottle and the formula, and I looked at it and I was like, "I'm so defeated." And I think what really set that in is because my sister was like going through it. She did it. She did it even with her second child. And
Mm,
I'm just like, she goes, "It's so good and everything like this." And when I was around her and I had to feed Anastasia the bottle, I know she pumped. I was just like, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And I just
mm.
feels like it looms over my head at that time.
Yeah, that's really difficult. It's really hard when people have to change the plan, and I don't think we do a very good job, providers and family members and friends, of recognizing the grief that comes with a changed baby feeding plan and being okay with the grief. Just sitting with somebody and saying, I'm sorry that this is happening to you, even if I can't change it or control it in any way, just allowing people to be sad about how it's turned out for them is really important.
Yeah, and that went into my OBGYN telling me because I had my kids, they're Irish twins, they're 11 months apart.
Oh,
Their both
wow.
birthdays are in March. When I had the emergency C-section with my son, my OBGYN actually told me, "You cannot breastfeed."
Why?
I do not know because they were worried about because I had eclampsia. I was on the verge of having eclampsia. I was preeclamptic. I was that close to eclampsia. And they're
Uh
like,
huh.
"You can't," because of the medicine that they were giving me to bring that down. And because I had to have a spinal to have an emergency C section. And I look at the literature now, that would have helped with the C section. I wouldn't have been getting up to get bottles. I wouldn't have popped the staple. Now that with that, I have a little where the staple popped actually when it grew back into a knot. Because
Mm.
it was, yeah, you know how the myofascial is. If it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't heal up, it can make a knot. It did that on the one side. I know now if I would have not listened to him, I would have healed up better. And that is, I wish every woman could know. After a C section, you can do that. And it does help bond, especially when after an emergency C section like that, you feel like the baby should be inside you, should be there. That's how I felt with my son.
Mm.
I wish I would have breastfed him because that would have gave that feeling to me that I
Right.
had him still close. And that is when I think I realized it later on in life. I think my husband helped me realize it that I didn't have the support in any faction. That's
Right.
why I felt like he still needed to be inside me and I had really bad postpartum.
So it was your OBGYN that said, don't breastfeed. Wow. That is incredible. What part of the country are you in?
I'm on the East Coast and at the time I was living in Virginia.
Okay. Yeah. It's I'm surprised. Your kids are teenagers, is that right? Okay. That's not so long ago that your provider could not have been more well informed about breastfeeding.
Yeah, it was said in this way: I do not recommend that you do this. It would not be necessary for you.
It would not be necessary.
Yeah. And then I have changed my pediatrician at the time, and he came in and he goes, "So are you bottle feeding or breastfeeding?" And I was like, "What?" And I was just like, "We're bottle feeding him, like we did Anastasia." And then he goes, "Okay." And then the nurse came in and said, when they finally could bring me my son when I was healthy enough, they're like, "We put him on the bottle." I'm like, I didn't even get a chance to even make a decision yet. They're like, "We're putting him
Mm.
on the bottle since that's what you did with your daughter." I'm like,
Mm. How long of a gap was it from the time you had the C-section until you were able to hold your baby?
"Oh my God." My mother was the first one that got to hold him.
Wow.
Um, she was in there. I'm happy she was there. My mother,
Mhm.
I might not have a perfect everything with her, but she was there with that. And yeah, I know I had him at 8 something. I know it was like midnight by the time I got to do that because I passed out
Okay. Yeah.
and I was on the medicine. I remember after holding him for a little bit, they're like, "We're going to take him back to the nursery." And they got me up to walk around to go pee. My blood pressure went down and I
Okay.
couldn't hear nothing. They were like, "You can't really hold him too much," because I was that close to eclampsia that they were like afraid.
Wow.
And I asked
Yeah.
for him. I asked for him.
That makes it really difficult to bond with your baby when you're experiencing a medical emergency, but on top of that, people who aren't supporting you to bond with your baby. There are ways to still be able to bond even when you're having a medical emergency, but it just sounds like that was not a top priority for the care providers.
No,
Yeah. And so after your son was born, did you experience colostrum leaking or your
yeah.
milk transitioning? And how did you deal with that?
I had colostrum, yes. And I went about my day. I had some pads in, I went about my day, and I just was like, this is not my plan. This is what's not been on my way, so I'm not even gonna try to even go down that road. So it dried up pretty quickly for me. I think that was a blessing. And I think it was hard because trying to deal with the C-section and deal with that and then a new baby, it was just so much, especially I was doing it by myself.
Mm. And an 11-month-old around that you were sharing.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's where my mom came in to help with that because she helped with my daughter. But I even feel with that I didn't get to spend enough time with her because she was 3 or 4 months old when I got pregnant again. So I was carrying around
Mhm.
her, carrying around my son. And if I could go back, I love them, but I would not have them so close together.
Yeah, that is a lot. And how did bottle feeding go with both of your kids?
And I say
Mm.
that because we tried the same stuff my daughter was on. He was constantly throwing it up. And they're like, this is colic. This is this. And then now in the last 2 years, we figure out he has an autoimmune, and that's why. So
Mm.
I had a good pediatrician at the time. He's still my kid's pediatrician. He goes, we're going to put him on Similac. We're going to put him on Nutramigen. That is the sensitive stuff. No way, no this. It's the most sensitive stuff. That's the only thing he could keep down, and that was even minimal on that. It took
Yeah.
him, he did not grow. It took him till the last 2 years to finally grow,
I
like
was
the other
about to
kids.
ask I was about to ask what his growth pattern was. Yeah, so how did you find out that he has an autoimmune disorder?
Because we fought me and my mom and other people fought from the time he was born. We've said
Mhm.
this is not this. This is not all me becoming a holistic health practitioner. It's gluten. It's dairy. Because we fought his new pediatrician. His pediatrician was like, this is not right. And then finally, specialists were like, we're gonna go in to do a GI. And they did a GI and found eosinophils. So he
Mm.
has eosinophilic gastritis, and he's had this since birth. You can tell where they digged in. It's like this is things women need to know about with their kids, because if they're having a feeding issue, even on bottles, don't just say it's colic.
Right.
That's what we heard for like years. It was colic.
Right. Yeah, that is so hard, and when you have to feed a baby so many times a day, anywhere between 8 and 12 times a day, that trauma of the difficulty is just ever present because by the time you feed, get them calmed down after the feeding, deal with the reflux, they might sleep a little while, and then you have a few minutes to recover before the cycle begins again.
Especially when you have, it's one thing to have throw up, but it's another thing to have everything come out.
Yeah. If you could look back on this situation and say, these are the moments in which I wish somebody would have supported me better to help me understand what was going on, what do you wish would be different? How do you wish you were differently supported?
I wish when I had what could have been thrush, like you said, thrush or whatever it was, if somebody would have told me I could have breastfed through that. And two, when I went in with my son, I didn't have that trauma, and I didn't have somebody just automatically assume I was bottle feeding
Mhm.
and just let me choose.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. Were there lactation consultants at the hospital
Yeah,
where
yes,
you
they
gave
did.
birth? Yeah,
Hmm.
it was the same hospital both times?
Yep.
Okay. But did they ever come in and talk with you after the birth of your son?
No,
Okay.
they never came in because it was already assumed I didn't need them.
Yeah, that is very difficult. I'm sorry that you went through that. I'm so glad that we have formula and bottles to be
Yeah,
able to feed babies, and it's really disappointing when somebody has been, um, misinformed by somebody who they should be able to trust as a care provider. So then tell me how this led to you becoming a birth coach and a pregnancy and fertility coach, and tell me how that led you into any of your other trainings that you've done.
because of my own health issues and because of my sons and my daughters and the people around me, and I have nurses in my family, I think I always had that in me to help people. So after I got out in my bachelor's degree, because I was going to go and do restaurants and stuff and other type of ventures, I decided no, I have this issue. I need to see someone. And my general practitioner at the time, I loved him to death. He goes, "You might want to see a health coach. You might want to see somebody or a nutritionist." So I looked up a nutritionist and I started seeing a nutritionist. And she looked at me and she goes, "You don't need me. You're already doing the research. I'm just here to facilitate it. It's like more of I'm a consultant." She
Mm,
goes, "Instead of this whole section, we only need two or three." So
mm,
she let me off the loose, and I just kept doing my own research. And because I loved herbs for so long, I got back into that. And I was like, after I get out of my bachelor's degree, I'm going to go do something in health. So I
mm,
took an alternative medicine course, and the school decided to name it integrated medicine, which is hard to integrate within the Western system at the time. But it was like, yeah, hopefully this is the future. I took that. We learned about health coaching. We did all that. And because I had a stress teacher at the time, stress and mindfulness teacher, who had a list of certifications and degrees and worked with Google on artificial intelligence and the Sophia project. She's don't ever stop learning. She goes,
mhm,
keep going. So she goes, what you find that's passionate, learn about it, continue to do it. So I took that philosophy that I was interested in herbs, became a certified herbalist, interested in energy medicine, became a Reiki teacher and master. I wanted to do health coaching, so I became got a certification in health coaching. Didn't realize it was also life coaching at the same time, and then took many discontinued education classes with functional medicine, with gluten intolerance, certain certifications that talked about gluten intolerance, how to do elimination diets, stuff like that. And in the last year or so, I've took some continued education classes, personal classes in fertility, because I had my own fertility issues, and menstrual issues. So I took those, and then I've took some certifications in birthing, and I'm hoping, like I said, in December to do a childbirth education class because I want to go deeper into that. And I've took some pregnancy classes too. I think life experience also is a good help as well. And I have books. That's another thing. I'm Even if you have a certification under your belt, I am an advocate. You continue to read and you
Mhm.
continue to learn, and you
Yeah.
learn along with your clients or patients as well.
Yeah. So do you work with people one on one?
Yes,
Okay.
but I would see, like I said, I would see couples if they were a couple and they were trying to conceive. I would see them as
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And just going back to your own stories, when you were having to make the tough decisions to wean or to not even begin breastfeeding at first, did people in your life understand how difficult it was to make that decision?
well. I think my mother did, and I underestimate her sometimes. She was supportive. I think my father was, because he's not around, but he was around in his own capacity. That helped, and I think my husband actually did too. Even like now with the issues I still have when it comes to certain things, he helps because you don't ever get over that grief. So you see your kids as a little, still as a little kid. Oh my God, I wish that I would have done
Mhm.
that. And yeah, they were supportive in some ways, but in my perspective at that time, no, nobody
Okay.
was.
Yeah.
Now I can look back on that and see.
Yeah. And when you said that you had postpartum depression when your daughter was about 3 or 4 months old after weaning, were you able to get any help for that?
It was medication. It was take this
Mhm.
antidepressant medicine,
Mhm.
and I took that for a while, didn't like it, got off of it. With my son, it was the same thing. And I could not vocalize how I felt till he was about 4 years old. To vocalize it. Even now, saying that, how I felt, it's still emotional to me
Mhm.
because I see his struggle and now I see him come out of it, sorry. And I'm like, and it's if somebody would have listened to me, if I would have had a counselor. And that's what I see all these women having that now, like killing their babies or doing all this. And it's like, you guys are sad. Something has happened. Where is the support? You have the husband, you have the mother, you have whatever you have, but where's the bigger support system?
Mm,
Where's the catch? We
mm.
don't take postpartum depression seriously. We want to medicate it. We don't think about what's going inside the person's actual head, what they're thinking. And I've learned a lot of postpartum that I have seen and have researched is an instinctual reaction of this is baby is not safe. The baby should still be in here safe. They're in safe in the belly because everything out here you're seeing as not safe. It's something internally we are instinctually thinking
Yeah.
in most cases.
I think our rates of postpartum depression and anxiety, perinatal mood disorders are much higher in a society where we have very small family groups because we evolved in larger groups where lots of people took care of every baby. And so the rates are much higher. And I am so glad that we have medication because if you cannot change your situation
Yeah,
and you need that help for your brain to function in a way where you can take care of yourself and your baby, then there is no shame in doing that so
no,
that you can feel better.
yeah, it's
So,
just medication did not work for me because it was not a mood disorder. It wasn't a depression disorder caused by something. It was the mental processing, the way I was thinking. So it would have been a counselor I needed, not just take this. And then when I came back into the doctor, like, how you feel? I'm like, I feel the same. And they're like, this ain't
right.
working for you. Stop taking it. There was
Yeah,
no other way out.
that's the big difference. It's one thing to prescribe medication, it's another thing to prescribe medication and to say, "Here is a therapist who specializes in perinatal mood disorders and who can help you process everything that has happened to you. Take the medication and see this person, and then we'll check back in and see how you're feeling.
Yeah, I years later, I went to a counselor and she helped me work through that, and she goes, "These things will still come up. They will still be very emotional, but it's acceptance and accepting
Mhm.
it and owning it."
Right.
So I own that. I am not ashamed that I had postpartum depression in both my kids.
Mm.
I am not ashamed. I feel like because I did not dip my toes into the more severe side of it that we can see, that I'm a survivor of
Mm.
that. I did not dip because I have seen that, or that side where it becomes very dangerous. And that's what scares me, because the same thought that I had of my baby should be in here, should be safe, is the same thought that leads women to hurt their children. It's that same thought line and the mood and all that. And I can see where that can tip over.
Yeah.
And we do need people to check on that, like
R
lactation consultants and
Yeah.
midwives and OBGYNs, just to not be like, yeah, let's just give you this. But what's really going on? So that
Yeah,
bigger support system, like you're saying, is right.
we don't just do the screening, but then we say, "Hey, you don't have to keep suffering. Let's get you some help and let's continue to check in until you feel better." And I know many people are afraid to say how they're truly feeling because they're afraid if they bring it up, then action is going to be taken, which removes them from their children instead of having the action taken of
Which happened with me.
providing the help.
Which happened with me. I
It
share
did.
custody with my mom for many different reasons for that, and I'm not ashamed to say that.
Mhm. Yeah, and at what age did that take place? Was it early on?
Mhm.
Okay.
I think that's
Wow.
what hampered my bonding with my son for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And were you living in the same household with your mom?
Mhm.
Okay. So you got to be around them all
Yeah,
the time.
moved out and moved on and stuff like that, but I still can stay connected, and there's a shared back and forth between us when we, as mothers, I feel like this ain't my only calling. I have seen this happen to many people, especially even after COVID, where families broke up and things happen, even babies. We see women leaving, or we see men leaving, and we see grandparents getting the child, or we see the split. We are still mothers, no matter what our experience it is, no matter how long we have our kids. And I think that's another societal shift we need to have.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Was that something that was enforced upon you, or it was
Mm,
something that you decided to do along with your mom for your own health?
both. Yes,
Okay.
both.
Okay. Wow, thank you so much for sharing that because I know you are not the only one who has experienced that. There will be other listeners who have experienced a similar situation, and you are right. You are still a mother. Those You are still a mom. You bore those children, you grew them inside of you, and I'm sure you continue to be in their lives
Oh my
to
God, all the
a
time.
great extent. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, no, and
Yeah.
that's where I think my mother is great, because she's never cut that off. She understood, because it
Mhm.
happened to her with her two kids, first two kids. It happened with her, and I
Mm.
think she's no. It's at your own capacity, and as they got older, it's you will take the reins now, and I love that.
Mhm.
And I've had to shift that perspective over many years to victim to not,
Mm. Will you tell me a little bit about that? About feeling like a victim at first?
because I didn't want to do it and I felt forced because of certain decisions. But looking at it now, I can see that gave me time to grow. That gave me, because I was still in postpartum, that break. I think she
Mhm.
saw that. I think she's
Mm.
no, you're breaking. You need to go have a life. But
Mhm.
trying to voice that. But trying to voice that and then having your mother also be like, nope, this is what's going to happen. Two opposite forces coming together. If we would have
Mhm.
just sat down and had that conversation mutually instead of trying to force each other. I was trying
Mhm.
to run away. She was trying to pull me this way. And I wish we would have sat down like we have now and been like, no, this is what we were trying to do. So I
Mm.
always saw it as she took everything. somewhat I still see that, but now I can be like, okay, we were going like this instead of like that, and I wish we would
Mm.
have came together.
Yeah, you pulled your hands apart. So you were moving in opposite directions instead of coming together to decide what was best for you and the children and
Hmm.
her together.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now you're able to time heals most wounds and you're able to see the good intentions that she had and the way that she did help you to be able to recover from postpartum depression, even though you wish it had gone differently.
Oh yeah, and I think in a weird, twisted way, she helped me become the mom I am. She helped me say, I'm going to break these cycles in our
Mm,
family. I'm going to break these different cycles, these thoughts. She's the biggest supporter, other than my husband, of my business. I will post something, she will share it like a mad lady. That is the way she shows support,
mhm,
and it has healed a lot in my childhood between me and her as a mother, and I'm happy about that. But it's also gave me a more respectful tone of what I want to do with my kids. So I modeled the opposite.
mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I would love for you to take a moment to share where my listeners can find you and access your services.
Yes, you can find me at theholisticglen.com, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Holistic Glen by Glenna James.
Great. I'll have all of those linked in the show notes as well as your podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have you been given some advice by a healthcare professional that you are not sure is accurate? Have they diagnosed you with thrush? Have they told you to massage and pump extra during mastitis? Have you been told to bind your breasts when you're wanting to wean? If you are unsure that the information you are being given by healthcare professionals is accurate, then reach out. I would love to be the person who provides evidence-based information regarding all things lactation and baby feeding so that you feel really good about the choices you have made. You can find me at lo@quavinbirthservices.com. Just shoot me an email. I'll get you set up. I can bill most insurance companies. And as you're dealing with whatever difficulty you're having during your lactation journey, why not reduce your stress by going to feastandfettle.com, getting $30 off your first order of home-cooked meals delivered right to your door in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Maine and New Hampshire. You've got nothing to lose and so much to gain.